So welcome everybody to this latest episode of Macklin's Take with me, Andy Clark and Matt Macklin. Hope everybody's well. Hope you enjoyed the podcast last week with Carl Froch. We definitely did. Froch is right up our street. We always enjoy getting him on because he's just got this mixture of, I don't know, I'd probably describe it as well, I mean, it's definitely knowledge, but with a good sprinkling of total nonsense, which just suits us down to the ground. That is us all over. He's not everybody's cup of tea, the Cobra, but he's definitely ours. So if you haven't listened to that, do go back and have a listen and have a look at the YouTube channel as well, because we pulled a few clips out there of Carl talking about various things, which, definitely seem to arouse some debate, shall we say. So on to today's episode, and we are sticking in the same part of the world. We are moving seamlessly from one sheriff of Nottingham to the other, from one legend of Nottinghamshire to the other, because today's guest is someone who's been steeped in boxing for the same amount of time, really. Amateur and pro, he had a good career, and he is now, I'm going to say, a board licensed, you can correct me in a minute, a board licensed promoter, manager, trainer, and matchmaker, up there with Steffi Bull and John Pegg as the probably most licensed people in British boxing. And we've seen him quite a lot recently, because we see him a lot anyway, but we've seen him quite a lot recently because he operates at all levels of the sport. So we saw him leading the corner for his fight to David Avanesyan against Josh Kelly at the SSE Arena a couple of months ago, and what was a big fight, big night, much anticipated fight. And we saw him in Gibraltar as well, where he was kind of guesting in the corner to an extent, but revisiting an old stomping ground where he headlined a show when he was a pro. And he was actually staying on the same yacht, the Sunborn, I think it's called, that he got married on. I saw him tweeting. He's firmly ensconced in what is an unbelievably impressive man cave, massive TV, boxing memorabilia, and a bar behind him is Carl Greaves. Carl, this has been a long time coming. We've been meaning to get you on for ages. You've had you've had a right couple of months, to be honest.
Yeah, I've been very busy. Been in the limelight, which has been nice. But enjoying it, doing well.
So let's kind of just go back to the start a bit, because we always enjoy hearing about people about how people got into the sport. So you started boxing pretty young, I think, about 10 or 11. Why boxing? What happened?
Yeah, I first went to the boxing club at 9 years old. I can remember being in the local working men's club where my parents used to take me at the weekends. And I can remember seeing Barry McGuigan in the back room winning the world title, 1985 it was. And I just got mesmerised by it. And I was a big fan of the Rocky films. And I just said to my stepfather, I said, I'd love to get involved in boxing. And he actually knew the local amateur coach, Dick Daubney. So he rang Dick, and Dick said, look, he's not old enough, but let him come down, see what he thinks. I went down, I had a great time, did really well. And then he says, come back when you're 11, because this is when we take you in. Went back when I was 11 and never looked back, really. Been in boxing ever since.
So we often say, me and Matt, and he lived it, I didn't, but amateur days, and yeah, I think you got selected for Young England, so you got to a good standard. Amateur days are those kind of simpler times where you're just doing it for the love of it, and you stayed in boxing for the love of it. It's your living as well, obviously, but now that you're embroiled in the business side of it in pro fighting and have been for a really long time, people who've ended up going down that route, they look back at the amateur times and just think, wow, like I didn't really understand just how good that was, where I was just thinking about fighting and that was it.
Yeah. I mean, obviously you don't really know how far you're going to go with it, but it's something I've always wanted to do. I mean, since a young boy, I've never really given up. I've had my ups and downs, I've had my knocks. I've never really had anyone behind me supporting me. I've done it all myself off my own back. I never had parents coming to watch me. I always remember I used to go into the shows and they always had the parents here, but my parents was never really that interested. They just let me crack on. I did it all my way, really. And just kept plugging away, had me ups and downs, and got to like 15, 16, it started getting really serious then. got to a national junior ABA final, got to a couple of NABC national semi-finals, got picked for Young England, and there was hardly getting beat then. And it got to the stage where at 19 years old, I kept going in the ABAs, and I was meeting a kid called Craig Spacey, who was a very good amateur at the time. He'd won a junior gold medal at the Europeans. I kept getting beat by him in the Midland finals. So it was either turn pro or pack up. So I had a meeting with John Ashton at 19 years old and decided to turn professional. And so it's been a great career.
And Matt, like I say, we see Carl around all the time, and we see his fighters here, there, and everywhere. And we spoke to Steffi about this time last year. Steffi Ball, we know John Pegg, obviously, we know him well. And what's interesting about speaking to all of them, and it's definitely true of Carl, is that you look at what he's gone on to do outside the ring. And you can just see from hearing him talk about his career, just briefly there, we'll get more into the pro career, but you can see how he's made such a success of it, because the fighters that he's looking after, he knows what it's like to turn pro without any real backing. He knows what it's like to have to do the graft and forge your own path. He knows it all.
Yeah, I mean, listen, people read boxing news and Ring Magazine and watch Sky and whatever else, and they think that boxing's a certain way. But that's a certain way when you've got a massive promotional outfit behind you. They don't know what goes on at the lower levels. Let me tell you, it's an absolute grind. It wasn't a grind for me because I was one of those people. I was ABA champion 18, big amateur pedigree. Got a big deal turning pro, and it set me up, and I carried it on. But I boxed for Small League Amateur Boxing Club. We did a podcast a while back with the likes of Paul and Mark Ramsey and Anthony Maynard and these guys. But so I came through knowing the reality. I knew how hard it was. Luckily for me, like I say, I had great amateur momentum, pedigree, and it turned over. But the reality of pro boxing, away from being signed to a big time promoter, it's hard work, man. And it's people like Carl, John Pegg, Steffi Ball, your Steve Woods of the world as well. If it weren't for these people grinding day in, day out, and it's a 24/7 business, let me tell you, and no 9 to 5, because that phone could go at 2 o'clock in the morning. You mentioned that he even does a bit of matchmaking. Who the fuck would want to be a matchmaker? You know what I mean? And it's like, literally these people are the lifeblood of British boxing. And listen, world boxing around the world, but we're concentrating in the UK, aren't we, at the minute? And these people, if it weren't for the likes of your Carl Greaves, your John Pegg, Steffi Ball, boxing wouldn't. You could be Eddie Hearn, you could be Frank Warren. If you didn't have these people grinding, it wouldn't happen. You couldn't continue. Do you know what I mean? It's like we talked off air before we come on. Before we recorded, and he mentioned about bringing a kid up sparring. I mean, I remember it when he said it then. Well, even that, coming up on a Tuesday night up to Manchester, bringing a kid up to spar, you know what I mean? There ain't no glory in that, let me tell you. So it's, but it's if these things didn't happen, the wheels would stop turning.
Well, we'll get into the where boxing is at the minute, because crowds aren't that far away from coming back, and the small hall scene in that regard in just a bit. But let's have a bit of a chat about that pro career, because it was a good career. And when I was looking back at it today, I was looking back through your record. The first fight that just jumped out at me straight away was a fight you had with Steffi Ball, 6 rounds, 1997. You lost by half a point. I imagine you still dispute it. Macklin still bitterly disputes his points defeat against Andrew Facey. Don't get him started. But it's just amazing to think that the two of you, like your careers and I mean, boxing lives have run in kind of real parallel lines. I mean, so what did go down that night then? Half a point to Steffi Ball at the Doncaster Dome.
For my memory, he was a tall, long southpaw. I mean, I'm a left-handed orthodox fighter, so my left hook was always my great punch, the best punch. But from what I can remember, the first 3 rounds, they were a bit awkward for me, a bit long. Probably outboxed me, tied me up inside, did what he had to do. And then the last 3 rounds, I was on the front foot pushing him back, and I thought I won the last 3. So it was a stone cold draw. I think Steffi will agree with that. He got the hometown verdict, the Doncaster Dome verdict, by half a point. So yeah, it is what it is. I mean, it's amazing, really, because I actually went on to manage Steffi at the end of his career. Started promoting shows at the Doncaster Dome for him, and obviously all his fighters it was involved with. And then obviously when he retired from boxing and got his own license and that, he took Doncaster Dome back off me. So we've got a great friendship, me and Steffi, good relationship. We always reminisce about the old days, and we've been through a lot together. But yeah, the fight was definitely a stone cold draw, definitely.
Oh, you boxed Alex Arthur, didn't you, up in Newcastle, 2002?
Yeah.
It's a big night. Gomez, Alex Arthur, Carl Johannesson.
Yeah, they were. I won. I lost 3 in my last 27 to Gomez, Arthur, and Johansson. 2 for the British, and obviously I lost my WBF title to Carl Johansson at Wembley Arena. So yeah, it wasn't bad. I mean, good to say been in the ring with that sort of level of opposition. I mean, obviously I was always the away fighter, so in them sort of level. So it was good experience, and nice to look back on.
But I suppose where you are now, understanding what it's like to be the opponent at that level and different things, to be on TV shows, to not be on TV shows, because they're worlds apart, aren't they, in terms of the finances, etc. That's probably been absolute paramount for you, really, in forging the career that you have done post your own boxing career.
Yeah, experience I've gained obviously from being obviously the away fighter as such. I mean, obviously in my career, I mean, I was an home kid most of the time because I used to be a big ticket seller, but all my big fights was mainly away from home. And obviously I took a few away jobs because I won my first 6 and then lost 4 of my next 6. I had a bad run. Obviously Steffi was involved in that patch. And then I went on to win 12 on a trot, boxed Gomez for the British. And obviously, this is where, from sparring and fighting, it's completely different kettle of fish, because I went over to spar with Gomez. I'll never forget. A couple of weeks before he were fighting for the British title against Gary Thornell, and I fought him more than hold my own. Yeah, I boxed him for the British, and he's the only person ever to knock me out. You know what I mean? So it's just crazy how different from sparring and fighting actually is. And when you hear about, he did well in sparring, he stood him on his head, you don't mean nothing, Matt. You know that, because sparring and fighting is completely different. So, yeah, and then I won my next 4, and then I got a shot at Alex Arthur, which is a big occasion. Chief support to Ricky Hatton and Joe Calzacchi at the Telewest Arena in front of a sold-out. I think it was 12,000 there, rammed in there on Sky TV. And at the time, Alex Arthur was 14-0 with 12 knockouts, the rising star. A British boxer. Went in there, did really well with him. Took him to the 6 rounds, was never off my feet. And it was a bit premature, the stoppage, but I mean, it was probably only going to go one way. I was in the fight up to round 4. But yeah, so it's been a good career.
And did you go straight sort of into managing, training, matchmaking, or straight after your own career?
It's funny, really, because obviously I'll go back to, I failed a routine brain scan in 2001. I mean, you know how strict the scans are, the MRI, MRA. And I had a slight change in it in 2001. It was the same time when Wayne, there was 14 boxers, actually. It was a new medical officer, and he took license off 14 fighters who had a query with a scan. It was the same time of, it was Wayne McCullough when he failed his. I think Dale Robinson was one, another quite good name back in the day. And I was suspended for 10 months. And in that 10 months, I didn't know whether I was going to get my license back. So I went and applied for my trainer's license. So I've actually had my professional trainer's license 20 years. I'm 44 now. I got my trainer's license at 24. And I started training a few local fighters, Stevie Williams, a boxing jockey, Tony Darling. I had Matt Scriven, Ivan Bottom. I had a good little stable. But then I got my license back, and that's when I had all my big fights. Obviously, Johansson, Arthur, boxed Benno, the match for the WBF World title, won that. So, and then I got my license back, but I've always renewed it. So I think I'm one of the only person in the country that's never actually been on this trainer's course that they do now, the new trainer's course, because I've never let it lapse. I pay my license fee, my trainer's license fee every year. So I've had it a long time, you know what I mean? It's been a good experience having it, really, because I've seen a lot of things as well.
So basically, you're fucked if you ever need to give first aid.
Yeah. So yeah, it's been good, mate. Good career, good times.
So how do you kind of? You mentioned you trained a couple of local fighters. How did it all kind of then build? Because how long after that was it? How long after stopping boxing did you think to yourself, okay, I could do this full time? This could be my full time job, and then maybe you start to think about being a manager and then a promoter. I mean, how does the whole thing gather pace, gather steam?
Yeah. Well, what happened was I had another after my big fight. So we're down to fight Stephen Chinnock for a British title eliminator, Midland area title and British super featherweight title eliminator. I should never have stuck at super featherweight. I'd well outgrown the weight. I mean, that's when I lost to Johansson. I won the WBF title in 2003. I never defended it for a year. Then I boxed Johansson. I'd well outgrown the weight. I should have moved up, to be honest. It was absolute murder making super featherweight. I remember being £9 over the morning of the weigh-in when I boxed Johansson. It was ridiculous, absolutely ridiculous, scary stuff, to be honest, looking back. And I mean, obviously, I've learned so much. Obviously, we're making weight myself and what you go through. So, I mean, you've got to do it right. It's all experience now as a trainer. And then I got a chance to fight. If I stayed at the weight, should never have done. And I had another change in my scan in 2005. I can remember being laid on the set. He had been for a run. It was Valentine's Day 2005. I'll never forget. And Robert Smith rang me. He said, got some bad news, Carl. I said, what's that, Robert? I expected the worst. He said, you've had another change in your scan. And I was like, oh, you're joking, mate. He says, no. He said, unfortunately, Carl, you'll not be fighting in a few weeks' time. He said, it's been quite a significant change as well. We can't really put a finger on it, what is wrong. He said, there's something about the caving in the left-hand side. It sort of like got a little bit bigger, but I've never had headaches, never had memory loss, always been sharp as a razor, I think. And it's crazy to think that I failed a scan twice. So I sat and thought about it, and I just thought, you know what, that's me done now. I had a few tears, I had a couple of two little girls, and I thought, nah, that's me done. So I retired, but obviously, like I said before, I had my trainer's license already. I kept that up. Within about a week or two, I went looking for premises, got myself a gym, started training fighters. Word got around, and my whole intention really was just to train a few local fighters from around Nottinghamshire and Lincolnshire. Got my manager's license in 2006, and then the word got around, and the phone was ringing, and I've heard you managing fighters and all that, and it just snowballed, really. It was crazy, and but all I ever wanted to do was just train a few local fighters, put a few local shows on, build a few kids up, and go down that road. And then I got promoter's license in 2007, started promoting local shows, and then I was getting a lot of kids that was trying to sell tickets, struggling, saying, oh, I'm struggling to sell tickets, and I want to go on the road. And I gave them a chance, but I was never really their trainer. But I always used to do the corners, you know what I mean, for away fighters and that. So I sort of like got tarnished with the sort of like picture that I was a journeyman sort of like trainer and manager and that, but that was never the case, because I was a promoter building kids up every few months. I was putting shows on and building kids up, but I was always seen in the corner with away kids.
Now,
you know what I mean? I've been in some. Yeah. So everybody was like thinking like Carl's a new Nobby Knobs, but it was never the case. I was never the trainer. They never used to train the journeyman. They used to just do their own thing, ring me up, Carl. He says, will you do my corner tonight? So I had some of the best times of my life going up and down the country. I learned so much. I had a good probably, I don't know, 6, 7 years, you know what I mean? Going around the country on some big shows, learning so much. And but I always had my good prospects that I was building up as well, you know what I mean? And putting the odd purse bid in, winning bids for English titles and that. And I mean, I've had every champion across the board, from area level through to world, as a trainer, manager or promoter. And this is someone that started with nothing. I come into boxing. I mean, I never earned a lot of money in my career. I've done every job going, from making pine furniture to dealing in waste cooking oil, done brick labouring, I've done market trading, I've done everything. But boxing was what I always wanted to do. And I started like doing after dinner speaking, bringing big names to my town, and like Ricky Hatton, Frank, Nigel, Ben Collins, McGuigan, who I started with my first ever show. I did Roy Jones Barrera, and there was fantastic nights, and I learned a bit that way, putting shows together, built a few quid up, earned quite good money doing that. And then I went into the promoting, got my £10,000 bond, put it into the board, and done 147 shows since 2007. And obviously I've had 18 months out with the pandemic, so it's been a remarkable journey, really. And this is someone that's done it all off my own back, no backers, you know what I mean? It's just been crazy.
It's Andy, you've said a few times on shows we've done recently, even you said there's been some opponents that have come in to box, a matchroom fighter, let's say, and you said this kid's one of them. He gets his wins, he builds up his wins, he builds up his record on non-TV shows, obviously a ticket seller from where he's from. But then when he gets, when he boxes on the TV side, he's in the away corner as the opponent, and that's where his losses have generally come from.
Yeah.
Would you say you were in that kind of bracket, Carl?
As a fighter, yeah, that was me as a fighter. I mean, like I said, I took a couple of away fights early on in my career because I was 6-0. I got beat on the 7th fight. The ticket sales started dipping a bit, and John Ashton said to me, "Look, do you want to have a few fights on the road?" And I can remember him offering me JT Kelly. I don't know if you can ever remember him, from Sunderland. He'd won 25, lost 25. He offered me at 24 hours notice. He said, "I've seen this kid box before." He said, "I know you can beat him. Do you want the fight?" So I didn't really know what an away fight was. I said, "Yeah, no problem." Went down there and I beat him. You know what I mean? And that was the start of like my run where I went unbeaten for a while. But before that, I can remember boxing Irving Blake for the Midland area title. I'd gone from 6-2s level. I'd never done a 3-minute round. And on the 12th fight, I fought Irving Blake on a Pat Cardell dinner show at the Holiday Inn on the 12th fight for the Midland area super featherweight title. Another fight where I thought I'd won and got beat by the old half a point. I absolutely boxed his head off for the first 6 rounds. He come back into it because a rough, tough, strong man Irving was. I was 21-year-old. He was about 32. He was a strong kid, you know what I mean? But I still won the fight, I thought, but they gave him it by the old half a point. But looking back now, that was a blessing for me, because if I'd have gone and won the Midland title on the 12th fight, I'd have been putting a bit deep too soon, you know what I mean? I wouldn't have been quite ready for it. So when I lost to him, I rebuilt, won 12 on a trot. Went on a couple of Eurosport shows that John Ashton was doing with Barry Hearn back in the day. And built up and learned quite a lot through that way. And then obviously I got my crack at Gomez for the British. But all my defeats really was as an away fighter, to be truthful, on the big shows.
I said at the start that you kind of operated at all levels, and as you describe it there in your own boxing career, but it's also true when it's come to handling fighters. You described how it all kind of happened. I mean, was part of the reason, do you think, that in that part of the country at that particular time, that just were there not people doing what you were doing, or offering the service that you were offering, as in train, manage, promote? Was it kind of, did you have a good catchment area? Was it one of those scenarios where it was literally right time, right place for you?
Yeah, I never really looked at it. But obviously, like I say, it probably was. I was the first person ever to get a trainer's license from Newark, manager's license from Newark, promoter's license. I still am the only promoter ever from Newark.
But
yeah, I mean, it's something that I always wanted to do. I mean, like I say, I never looked at it like that. Just something I wanted to do. Boxing's me. I'm not from a boxing family. Nobody's ever boxed in my family. No one's ever been involved in boxing. But I feel like it was something I was born to do. You know what I mean? I've had my ups and downs, don't get me wrong, but I love the sport. I mean, I live and breathe the sport. It's something that I just do 24/7, really. Like, I mean, being a manager, trainer, promoter, matchmaker, I've got no choice, but that's all I do, really.
So what's it like trying to handle lots of different fighters' careers when they're in different kind of brackets? Because lads who come to you who want to go on the road, you've got to be brutally honest with them and tell them whether you think they're good enough to do that. Tell them what that life is, and that if they buckle down to it, you'll be able to get them work. But you've got to kind of assess them and make sure that they're not going to let you down, basically, when you give them a call and say, I've got this fight at 3 days notice, do you want it? And they turn around and say no. You know, you have to, I guess that's the key, isn't it? You have to explain to them how this works. And it must be the same with fighters who've got some real ambition. Everybody wants to sign with Matchroom or Frank Warren, and every fighter I've ever met thinks that that's realistic. But for some people, it isn't. And again, you might have to kind of put an arm around them almost and say to them, listen, I know that's what you wanted. It hasn't happened, but this is what I can do for you. Yeah.
I mean, boxing's changing, in my opinion. There's no proper journeyman about nowadays. Very few, to be fair. I mean, I can remember managing Johnny Greaves, 100 fights he had, and I've had Ryan Clark. I've had some good journeymen over the years. I've never ever trained them, but I've managed them, and they've been good, tough kids, you know what I mean, who you could rely on that was going to go the distance 90% of the time. Nowadays, it's a little bit different. I mean, one thing does strike me now is every journeyman has actually got a trainer, which is very surprising, because I can remember the days when they never had a trainer and they used to ring me, Carl, can you come and do my corner? And like I said, there was some of the best days of my life. I learned a lot from helping these journeymen out. I've been in sticky situations. I've had to deal with bad cuts. I've had to deal with lads that's been under the cosh, and I think it served me well, you know what I mean? I've done my apprenticeship that way, and I will never, ever forget them days. But now it's changed for me as well. I mean, I've got some good fighters coming through. I've built some kids up along the way, and 90% of the time, all my success really on the big shows has come from the away fighters, you know what I mean, as the opponent. Even some of the good wins I've had over the years, I've had some big wins on TV shows as an away manager trainer. So it has changed, but you need to know the sort of fighter you're dealing with to have trust in him and know the capabilities, really. And you've just got to be careful not to put him in too deep, because it can backfire on you. And you've got to know what you're doing, to be honest.
Carl, how did you come across David Avanesyan?
Yeah.
How did he end up in Newark?
It's a funny story, really, because Neil Marsh started managing David. He'd obviously heard about him, had a look at him. We did a show, me and Neil, at Blackpool, and this was when I wasn't involved with David. Neil said, would you like to do a joint show with me in Blackpool? Because me and Neil go back a long way. We go back to the days when he was dead close with Oliver Harrison, and we used to put joint shows on together, obviously myself, Oliver and Neil. Because I always got on well with Oliver, and he was good friends with Neil, and obviously that's how I got involved with Neil, really. So, yeah, so he said, what do you think? So I went down there and put a show on, and he said he'd brought Scott hold of some Russian, and I think at the time he was doing a bit with Everton Red Triangle. So he beat Dean Byrne. He looked very good. And I never had a clue that they were going to come to me and ask me if I wanted training. So basically, he parted ways with Everton Red Triangle, and he took David around a few gyms training, and he said, would you like to have a trial with him? And I said, to be honest with you, I mean, all the fighters I've really trained over the years, and this is probably why my name's never been out there as a trainer, has always really been part-time fighters, lads that's worked and trained. You know what I mean? I've never, ever had a fighter other than David that I've worked with full time. I mean, they all used to work in the day and come to me at 5 o'clock at night, and we used to do a session. But you know yourself, mate, you can't really teach a kid a lot when you're training a group of fighters. It's just like an amateur session, bag, pads, circuits. You're not really showing them nothing. And I've always been a very, very knowledgeable coach, you know what I mean? But it's always gone unnoticed because I've never had the chance to work with any elite fighters. So he brought David to me. We had a session, and he really enjoyed it and asked me if I'd want to be his trainer. So I agreed. I always knew it was going to be hard because training a fighter full time along the job that I'm doing as a matchmaker, promoter, and obviously training all the other kids as well was tough. But I was determined to make a go of it. And he come to Newark, I think it was 8 weeks before his fight. And his first fight was for the WBA interim world title against Charlie Navarro in Monte Carlo. So I took quite into the deep end. And I spent a good 8 weeks with him. Really enjoyed it. Was training him twice a day, probably 5 days a week, breaking my week up because I don't agree with these 5 days non-stop, 2 sessions a day. I think it's way too much. I think you need to be doing like three sessions on 3 days on a trot, 2 sessions, then having a day off in between and breaking them up. So we went over to Monte Carlo and we won the WBA interim world title. So that was a story, really. We've been together over, getting on for 6 years now. We've been in some big fights. Went on, had Shane Mosley, Peterson, Kavalauskas, the Kerman Lajaraga fights, obviously Kelly, and it's been unbelievable, really.
Yeah, I mean, it's an amazing story, that, because like Matt said, you know, how did David Avanesyan, an Armenian, end up in Newark? Like, only in boxing do these things happen. But you've talked about how things kind of went for you. And it kind of seems like karma almost, that after all your hard work, from nowhere, this kid appears in your gym from a completely different part of the world. And you get your opportunity to really spend some time with a good fighter. And look what you did, because, I mean, that Sugar Shane Mosley, Sugar fucking Shane, you know, it was
unbelievable, Andy.
What was that like?
It was unbelievable because Neil said, I think you can get David the Shane Mosley fight. I was like, you what? He said, honestly, he said, they went out to, where was it? Panama, yeah, I couldn't get the words out. Yeah, went out to Panama and I went to the WBA
convention.
Yeah, that was it, the convention. And he met up with Mosley out there. And I think Mosley was coming off 2 wins and wanted to crack at the WBA title. But David was interim world champion. So I think Neil did brilliant to get that fight. You know what I mean? It was on a Shane Mosley show in Arizona. And the funny thing is, at the time, Mosley were training with Roberto Duran. So you've got young Carl Greaves in the corner from Newark. And then looking across the ring, you've got Sugar Shane Mosley and Roberto Duran. It was like fairy tale stuff, you know what I mean? Unbelievable. And coming away with a victory as well, it was absolutely fantastic, mate. And a memory I'll never forget. And I can always remember Roberto Duran coming in the changing rooms and kicking off about something. I can always remember Neil telling him to get out and Denarf giving me, get out. He won't bother who he was. He just put him in the place as legend as what Roberto Duran was. I mean, it was business at the end of the day, mate. You know what I mean? So he just he got him out of it. But yeah, unbelievable stuff and great to look back on. And we got some good memories, some good pictures, and having Shane Mosley on your record, I mean, it's fantastic. And listen, he was coming off 2 wins, and I can always remember David saying, he said he can half punch. He said even at that age, he said he can half wallop. And they say that the last thing a fighter loses is his punch, as you know yourself. And he had to play it smart, but he beat him quite comfortably, to be honest.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know Neil Marsh, but he doesn't mess about by the look of things with anything.
Yeah, he's a straight talker, mate. Listen, he wants what's best for his fighters. He's straight as a coming, and he'll say how it is. You know what I mean?
With just sticking with that story for a bit, because it is really interesting. I mean, that fight against Kelly got made for late 2018. I was up in Sheffield. We both were, me and Matt, and obviously we know what happened. It disappeared the night before, morning of. Recriminations on kind of aimed at their side more than anything else. And I wasn't really sure if we would see it after that. But what was really impressive was the way that you and your team and David responded, because you went off to Bilbao, to Spain, to fight Kerman Leharaga, who was like 27-0 at the time, I think, or something like that. And he was banging out 12,000 packed out indoor arenas. And he was the next kind of European big thing, wasn't he? I mean, he was, it's anyone who will following it at that point will remember. And those 2 stoppage wins, to go there and stop him twice, that is proper kind of, you said, you're into the Rocky films like we all are. That's proper Rocky Balboa away day classic shit, isn't it? Because those are huge wins. Those
unbelievable. I mean, Neil said to me, I think you can get David the Kerman Leharaga fight, and obviously I'd seen Kerman blast out, obviously Frankie Gavin, Bradley Ski, Denton Vissal. It was a strong, heavy puncher. You know what I mean? And I can always remember when we got the fight, Alan Smith said to me, I mean, I don't think he thought David had much of a chance, you know what I mean? I remember him saying to me, he said, look, just be careful with that crowd. He said, it's very daunting. He said, you can lose a fight before you get in the ring with that crowd. But David's from a different kettle of fish, you know what I mean? He's from a different stock. I mean, nothing phases him. As you can see with his career, he's been all over the world. And most of the time as the away fight, I mean, well, they all have been away fights, really. Even Josh Kelly, he was actually got put in the away corner in the end. You know what I mean? He was in the red corner, even though he was the champion. But yeah, and we come out, and I tell you what, you've got to be a strong character to go to Bilbao and box Kerman in front of 12,000, because they don't have barriers in. I don't know if it's just in Bilbao or what, but when we went, there was no barriers. You walk out, it was just like little posts with rope on. You know what I mean? And there was hovering over you and whistling. I just was tunnel visioned and walked through. And for David to do that to Kerman, and when he actually beat him, you could hear a pin drop in the audience, in the crowd. It was daunting. We had to stay in the ring until the end, but they really warmed to David, the Bilbao fans, you know what I mean? And he went out there and did it again. And it was a little bit more bitter there. I don't think I was expecting David to blast him out in a round. But they've all become good friends of David, and good fans. He gets a lot of messages of support from Bilbao now for what he did to Kerman.
And Matt, the fight against Kelly, we were skeptical at the time in late 2018 that it would resurface, but it did, and then it kept getting rescheduled, and you kept thinking, well, I did, that maybe this is not going to happen for whatever reason, but then it did happen. And Team Avanesyan was super confident. Team Kelly was super confident. We were both all over this one. We both absolutely loved it. And then we saw what happened. We saw what happened on the night. And, it was pretty one-sided in the end.
I remember doing the preview show on the Sky YouTube channel, and we were building it up, doing the debate and that. And we were giving the pick, and it was like, I remember saying, I'm picking Kelly. I said, but if I'm honest, I'm picking him on potential, on promise, on what I've been told and what I've heard from people whose opinion I value, by the way. And that's really what I'm picking it on, because there's nothing so far on his record to suggest he's experienced enough or seasoned enough to beat a guy like David Avanesyan. But a lot of people whose opinion I value are saying this, that, and the other. So, on that, I'm picking Kelly, but he's going to have to be better than he's ever been by quite a stretch to get the win over Avanesyan, because this guy has got a very, real career, in the sense that no one's done this kid no favors. He's done it the hard way. What his record is his real record. You know what I mean? He ain't. You know what we're talking about? We talk about people that, you used to see some of them old Philadelphia fighters, and they ain't got the best of records, but actually they can fight like fuck.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? Because they've just been slung in. And Avanesyan, I thought, no one's built him up. He's just been thrown in. And so his record is the real record. And I thought, you know, Kelly ain't really boxed someone like that. Ray Robinson in New York, it was a draw. That was, yeah, he's a good fighter. But I don't know, this is a tough fight. But if he's as good as everyone's saying he is, then he should get the job done. So it was one of them, really. But as it played out, the fight, I mean, Kelly sharp, few rounds, everything. But Avanesyan was just sticking it on him, keeping it on him. And it was like, when Kelly had finished his punches, he wants to go for a breather then. Do you know what I mean? He's flashy in bursts, but Avanesyan is that type of guy. He didn't let him have his rests. So, you know, when he had a burst, he made have another one and another one and another one. And eventually, if you're not used to fighting like that, it's going to catch up with you.
Yeah, it's funny, really, because everything I predicted that would happen in that fight happened. I mean, what you're saying there about don't let Kelly have a breather, that were my tactics, Matt. I had it absolutely perfect. What we worked on, what I planned in my head, how that was going to happen. I'd seen watched Kelly more than any other fighter I probably watched, opponent-wise, in my life, because it'd been on and off that many times. And his last 3 fights said it all for me, what I wanted to see. He looked brilliant in bursts, and then he'd go away, try to get his breather, and he was fighting opposition that was letting him have a breather. You know what I mean? And I just said to David, look, watch this. Look what I'm saying. And we studied it and watched it. And I said, when he wants to breathe, don't let him breathe. And you can hear me in the corner. I mean, I'm not one of these flash coaches that come out with all these crazy words that you won't have a clue what to say. Simple tactic. Don't let him breathe, David. Don't let him breathe. Get on him. And you picked up on it in commentary straight away. Carl Greaves. You can hear Carl Greaves shouting, don't let him breathe. You know what I mean? You knew what the game plan was straight away. And it wasn't rocket science, but it worked to a T. And I just knew that Kelly would look great early doors, met David look bad at times, but David would finally get to him. He got to him a bit sooner than he expected, but he broke him down bit by bit. And every time, even when he wasn't landing punches, they were making Kelly work harder than he wanted to work. You know what I mean? And everything I predicted, everything I said come true. It was unbelievable, really. You know what I mean? But going back to obviously tactics now, I can remember being in my room, and I can remember it coming on my YouTube thing, tactics. Tony Bellew and David Colwell, Sky Sports Premier at 6 p.m. I can remember going down and seeing Alan Levine and Neil in the thing. I said, oh, I want to watch this one. No, don't watch it. Don't watch it. He said, really? No, don't watch it. He said, I wouldn't be interested in that. You know what you got to do. You know your tactics. And I never watched it. But about 2 weeks after the fight, I can remember watching it Saturday, and I thought, oh, I'll watch that, put it on. And honestly, they never gave David and Alan a chance at all. It was all, I mean, Tony Bellew was like, it's going to be another Kowalski's job. Adam Booth won't be taking this fight if he didn't think that Kelly could beat him and all that. But I couldn't believe it, man. If I'd have watched that before the fight, I may as well not have turned up. You know what I mean? Because they just never gave us a chance, mate. But I always knew that David had the beating of Kelly. That's why I persisted that the fight was going to happen. I wanted the fight to happen because it was going to be a great sculpt for David. That was.
So I was asked a few weeks ago on the Boxing News panel after Conor Benn's win, which was impressive, real good win against Samuel Vargas. What would be a good next fight for Conor Benn? And I think I was the only one of the four of us, I can't remember who the other three people were off the top of my head, who said David Avanesyan. It just seems really obvious to me. It's a European title. Who doesn't want to try and win a European title? And that was a really good win against Vargas. He's put himself at a certain level there, Conor Benn. I mean, you'd want it, wouldn't you? I mean, has there been any communication about that at all?
You know what? In every single interview that Conor's had, Eddie's had, anybody, David's name hasn't been mentioned once. Not once. It's crazy. And then the other night, I watched an interview with an IFL with Eddie and Conor, and I think Tony Bellew got involved as well. And basically, Eddie was saying that Conor's going to be fighting for the European title on July the 31st. Yeah, still not mentioned the David's name. So they're hoping that we're going to vacate. But obviously Neil's in negotiations, he's David's manager, but the only way we're going to vacate is if it's worth our while vacating and we're going to get a bigger offer, a bigger fight, you know what I mean? Because to me, it's not worth vacating unless we get a big opportunity. I mean, the European title is a good title to have. But he's adamant he's fighting for the European title, Conor, on July the 31st. That's what's been announced. That's what he said. If you look on there's a few interviews going around, a few websites and that. But we'll see what's materialised. But they've not mentioned David, and I just know they don't want to fight David. Listen, I'm not saying Conor don't want to fight David, because Conor's a fighting man. He'll fight anybody. But I know Tony Smith. I'm very good friends with Tony. I go back a long, long way with him. I've took fighters over to his gym for many times, David being one of them, sparring, and he knows David well, you know what I mean? He knows David well, and I just think that he knows that Conor's a couple of fights off someone like David. I know he had that good win against Vargas, but he jumped on him, you know what I mean, and caught him cold, and Vargas never really had a chance to respond, and the referee jumped in. Listen, it was a right stoppage, don't get me wrong, but if he'd have weathered the storm, you don't know what would have happened, you know what I mean? He's not really had the experience at top championship level, Conor, and going in with someone like David could be another Josh Kelly type fight, you know what I mean? And would Eddie want to risk, you know what I mean, going down that road, what he did with Kelly, with Conor Ben, because he's expecting Conor to be the next pound-for-pound star, you know, a pay-per-view star, you know what I mean? So they're going to have to get it right with Conor, and I just think that although it's a great fight on paper, it looks a fantastic matchup, I just think that Eddie knows it's one or two fights, and Tony, that it's one or two fights too soon for Conor. That's why they're hoping that we're going to vacate to give Conor the chance.
Yeah, I was just going to say, Carl, personally myself, and I'm a big Conor Ben fan, I'm quite vocal about that. I like the way he's, I love his attitude. I like, you know what I mean? I like watching him fight. It's exciting, and I've been impressed with his improvement. But I don't think he needs a fight with David Avanesyan just yet. He's progressing nicely. Listen, you're right about the Vargas fight. I think he should have been stopped. I don't think it was a premature stop. Maybe one or two punches premature, you could argue, but he was getting done. Do you know what I mean? So, he caught him quick, didn't he? And he got him out of there. I just think, you know, someone like Avanesyan, who, like you say, he's been there with Shane Mosley. He's solid, and he's got a good. Even the Spanish guy had the two fights with him, was a banger. You know, so he's got good whiskers, he's got good defence, good know-how. You don't really need. I think Conor Ben needs more seasoning. Listen, the Vargas fight, if it had gone 6 or 7 rounds, would have been good, because he's an experienced guy, and he might have asked a few questions of Conor that hopefully Conor would have eventually answered. But the fact that he got him out of there so quick, it was kind of over before he really got a chance to. Now, while it was a statement and it was impressive, and it got us all, wow, the hype machine rolling.
Yeah, even me.
But he didn't give him the schooling or the experience that we was hoping he'd get from that fight. You know what I mean? So
that's it.
It's almost like he needs another fight or two of that stature where, listen, you're not going to moan if you bang him out in a round, don't get me wrong, but ideally he'd get the 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 12 rounds even under his belt, because when you're going in with someone like Avanesyan at that level, you need that schooling, you need that seasoning.
Yeah, that's what I definitely. And they know that, Matt. They know that. They're not daft. They don't want it to be another Josh Kelly job. You know what I mean? If David goes and ruins Conor Ben now, then where they're going to go with Conor? You know what I mean? They need to get it right. I think they're expecting Conor to. He's a good name in him. I mean, obviously off the back of his dad as well. I mean, listen, he's gone past the Nigel Ben, the son of Nigel Ben. You know what I mean? But they don't want to spoil it with him. They need to get it right and get him a few more fights before they step him up to someone like David, in my opinion. It will be a great fight. It'll be a war if it did happen now, but David would beat him, mate, pretty convincingly, I think.
Okay, so we haven't got too much longer left, so we'll just switch topic and let's have a look at small hall boxing and what's in store for that over the coming months, because there hasn't been any, obviously, during the course of the pandemic. It's one of those events, one of those areas that relies completely on ticket sales. So it was just never, ever viable for small hall show to continue under COVID restrictions. When you are able to do shows again, how many small hall promoters are going to stick with it, do you think? Are there going to be casualties?
I'm not sure about promoters, but I do think we're going to lose a few fighters. I think a lot of fighters now have found other interest. Obviously, they've probably got new jobs and they've had that much time out now. Will they really want to go? Probably a lot of them probably put a lot of weight on. You know what I mean? Will they want to go through all that again and come back? I don't know. I mean, the younger generation, the up-and-coming kids, it's probably 2 or 3-0 will still be keen. But the ones at the back end of the career, it's probably not. I mean, the COVID's probably put jeopardised to them boxing again. But for me as a promoter, I've got more ambition than ever. The first show is booked for September the 11th at the Morningside Arena, Leicester, a TV venue. Really, I mean, it's had a few big shows there, old 3,000, fantastic setup. It would be my biggest show to date, to be honest, if it comes off. But all I'm waiting for is the testing to stop. As soon as the testing stops and the hotel bubble and the food and whatever you've got to pay for, then I'm ready to go, because even with a full crowd, a sold-out arena, having to pay for COVID testing and an hotel and food for 3 nights, it's just not feasible. I mean, me and Steve Wood worked it out, and I think he worked it out. It was £18,000 just for the testing, the hotel and the food for the 3 days bubble. And it's tough enough making money as a promoter as it is with a full house, you know what I mean? With no TV revenue, little bit of sponsorship, just relying on ticket sales only. So it's a tough job. So as soon as that testing stops, I'm ready to go. The venue is aware of that. I've got my deposit down and they know the situation. So I'm hoping once everybody's had the vaccination that really the Boxing Board of Control should be stopping the testing and we can get on with it, because I don't know about how much capacity will be allowed by then. The venue seem to think it won't be full capacity still. But even having a couple of thousand in there, I'll probably put a 10-fight show on. At the minute, I've got 15 names. I mean, I'm stacked with local talent in East Midlands. Got some good fighters. I think out of them 15, every one of them's unbeaten. And 90% of them are big sellers. So I'm pretty confident I could fill that venue. So yeah, I mean, I'm going to be more ambitious than ever. I'm going to probably cut down on the number of shows I do, but probably do bigger ones now, because I mean, obviously, if you're only allowed a certain percentage of crowd in, then I need a big venue anyway. And if we can have the full capacity, then the more the better.
Matt, do you think that's something that will happen kind of across the board, that all promoters at all levels, we've seen how TV has kept going, and Matching with Sky and BT and Frank Warren and Mick Hennessy and Channel 5 have done a great job with that. But do you think across the board that people will now be thinking not as many shows, but bigger, that's the way we're kind of looking?
Yeah, I mean, listen, it's a tough one, isn't it? Because they're gonna have to do the maths, aren't they? But as Carl says there, if you're putting on a show and you ain't got no TV, it's harder to get as much money from the sponsors. So it's it's going to be difficult, really. Like look, listen, I know a little bit about the small hall show, and because my brother's on a few shows. It's difficult. It's hard to make money. You get your lads out and they all get a win, and you get a bit of a manager's fee. So maybe you make a bit that way, or you break even, but you believe in where it's going and you're keeping everything moving. But it's hard to make money on the small hall circuit. So if you're throwing in, the costing of testing and staying overnight because you've got to go into a bubble and that, I'd say it's borderline impossible, because it's one thing breaking. If you're someone like Carl Greaves or a John Pegg and you're breaking even on a show, but you're getting the lads out and they get a win and it's working, it's moving and it's keeping everything moving, you might take that on the chin. But you don't want to be losing 10 grand, do you? For the sake of doing it either. So it's like, I don't know. Are they going to do less shows but bigger shows? Maybe. But then, the board, I think, after a certain amount of fights, to charge more, because there's got to be more officials.
Yeah, that's the trouble. That's the trouble. I mean, one of my success stories really is probably Sam Bowen. I mean, I took him all the way to British champion without TV. I mean, it's unheard of, really. You know what I mean? I couldn't get him in with a TV promoter. I don't understand why, because he was a very, very good fighter. He was He had 100 and...
Is that the kid from Ibstock?
Yeah. You've commentated on him before, yeah. He boxed on a Sky Sports show, a Matchroom show, early on in his career. I think he blasted that Ronaldo Moore in a couple of rounds with a body shot. But yeah, so that's a good success story. I mean, taking someone like him, investing a lot of money, albeit I did have a good sponsor behind him with him, Jordan Road Servicing, backed him, we invested a lot of money in him, got him to British super featherweight champion on a non-TV show. He beat Maxi Hughes for the title on my show at Leicester, King Power Stadium, in the conference room there. And then that's when I got him a deal with Frank Warren. But it was a big investment, you know what I mean? We chucked a lot of money into him to get him to British champion. He won the British title, I think, on his 12th fight on a all through non-TV shows, apart from that one on Sky Sports, which I was absolutely amazed when Eddie didn't follow up on it with him. I mean, he should have took him on there, but he just didn't seem interested for some reason. But yeah, we got him with Frank Warren, and he had some big fights and lost his title to Kakachi, not his British title to Kakachi, but he's moving up to lightweight when he comes back. But that was a big success story, really. I mean, I'm really proud of that, bringing a British champion through on non-TV. I mean, it was great.
It must be a bit of a head scratcher when you've got someone like that, and we've seen other examples of it from time to time where you just can't think of any reason why a major promoter wouldn't sign them. They seem to tick every box, really. I mean, that must be one of the most frustrating situations you can be in.
I've had a few kids like that. I mean, obviously, John Wayne Ibbott's another success story. I mean, he contacted me, was put onto me to manage him. He got beaten the prize fighter, I think, years ago now. And he was probably on the verge of packing up. Kev Lilly, who was a good friend of John Wayne Ibbott's, asked me if I'd be interested in managing him. I took him on. Never had a clue what ticket salary was or anything. And his first fight with me was an away fight on Steffi Bull show at Doncaster Dome against Tommy Coward for a British Masters title. And he goes and beats Tommy Coward. I took a punch and started promoting him down in Essex. And he was a massive seller, bringing in big numbers, was filling out the Great Civic Hall every time. And I got him mandatory challenger for the English title. And at the time, Eddie wanted to, I think it was Ricky Boylan and Tyler Goodwin wanted to put that fight on because he knew it was a big seller and an undercard of AJ at the O2. And obviously John Wayne was jeopardising that because when he put in for it, Robert Smith said to Eddie, he said, unfortunately, John Wayne, it's mandatory. So Eddie ran me and said, can we do something about this? So we went and had a meeting with Eddie. He said, look, step aside, let them two fight, and I'll put John Wayne on the undercard. I said, you do know John's a massive salary, he'll probably do 60, 70 grand worth of tickets. He went, really? I went, yeah. So he said, right, don't let me down, then I'll give him a chance. He put him in for WBC international welterweight title. He goes and flattens some Argentinian. Sold massive tickets, and that's how I got him in with Matchroom. It's crazy how it works, really, but through the history of every champion I've had to start from scratch with them on non-TV shows. I think I've had a champion every category from area to world. Even David Avanesyan, and I'm only his trainer, but he's been the away fighter 90% of his career, even back in Russia on the early days. It's remarkable, really, but I've had area champions, English champions, Commonwealth, international, European, world, all started on small hall shows. Fantastic.
That's amazing. It's absolutely amazing. I've just got one more question then before we have to wind this up, and this relates to the just to the current kind of state of the sport. And we discussed small halls, and hopefully they'll be back. They'll be back soon and full steam ahead. With regard to the TV shows, and they're not the be all and end all, we know that, but the ones that we've been working on the last 8-9 months, all three of us, do you think there's a chance that they might change back to how they were before? What I mean by that is that obviously during COVID, selling tickets didn't matter. And massive ticket sellers for that reason, which is obviously normally very attractive to promoters, that didn't matter. What did matter was competitive fights. What did matter was finding people who would step up, often at short notice, take a 50-50, and be able to compete at a really good level. It was fighters like that who the system had previously discarded in a lot of ways, who got the opportunities. And that's been brilliant. But when crowds come back, will that keep going? Or will it just be all about ticket sales again? Or is there some kind of balance to be struck? Matt, you first.
You know what? Yeah, you know what? It's been fantastic, some of the fights we've had. Obviously, with the circumstances, and obviously some of these kids being forced to step up sooner rather than later. But it's been great. I mean, I'm hoping we can keep it going. I'm hoping we can keep competitive fights going. You've got to realise, though, that when you've got a big ticket seller and you're building them all, you know what I mean? It's financial suicide getting him beat early, because you need these ticket sellers on these small old shows. You need them to make your shows work, because if you're putting top of the bills on, it's costing a few quid, like English title fights and probably, you know what I mean, area title fights. You know what I mean? You need big sellers on the undercard to make it work. And if you're chucking these kids in too soon, you got to remember all these kids that's on these undercards on small TV shows, none of them's amateur superstars, you know what I mean? So, but some of them are very, very good fighters that's gone unnoticed. And you know as well as I do that not all great amateurs make good pros. And not all, you know what I mean? And it can be vice versa, really. Some of these amateurs that wasn't that great turn out to be fantastic pros, because it's not just about the skill level. It's about the art and the desire, the will to win in the professional boxing game. It's, you know what I mean? I mean, look at the skill set of Josh Kelly compared to David Avanesyan. It was a one-horse race in that aspect. But I just knew that David's got something a little bit different to other fighters. You know what I mean? He might not have the skill set. If you went and watched Josh Kelly in the gym training on the pads, on a speedball, on all that, it'd make David look ordinary. You know what I mean? But it don't work like that. So you've got to get it right with these fighters on these small old shows, and you can't be chucking them in too deep. You've got to build them up properly and know when the right time is to let them go.
Matt, what do you think? Do you think that we will see that these 50-50 fights we've kind of got used to on TV shows and really enjoyed between fighters who previously wouldn't have got a look in because they didn't sell tickets? Do you think we'll still see them, or will it be like Carl says? Because even for the big promoters, you still want people who can shift tickets. You still want that.
Oh, absolutely. What I think will happen is, what I could see happening, well, I think will work, where we're used to sort of seeing 5 fights on the telecast, on the TV end. I can see that going down to 2 or 3 fights, and the budget being condensed, so there's more money available to make better fights, competitive fights. But then, you know, your ticket seller might be on the non-TV part of the card, but you probably give him a win because, you know, you put him in a fight that he should win because you want him to keep winning because he's doing loads of tickets and he's building. And the thing is with selling tickets is a lot of these guys, when they're undefeated, all their mates and their family and their friends and all these people that are coming along, they're buying into the dream of where this kid could maybe go. And while he's undefeated, there's no ceiling on where their imagination can take them. Once he gets beaten, it's like the bubbles burst a bit and they might go from selling 600 tickets to 300 or maybe even 150 or whatever. You know, it can be that dramatic sometimes because, like I say, they're buying it. The fact that he's undefeated, it's like, wow, the hype, there's no ceiling on the hype. It could go anywhere, who knows? But once they've been beaten, it's like, oh, well, we cap it at that. That's his level. So for a ticket seller, you know, it is important that he keeps winning. With the TV, it's important that there's competitive 50-50 fights. So I think there's got to be a rethink on it all.
Yeah, definitely. That's exactly what you said. It happened to me when I got beat. It went from 300 to 100, then it ended up at 50, then back up. It's when you start winning again, it's crazy. It's so important to keep winning. Everybody loves a winner, Matt. You know that.
But and ironically, in the case of David Avanesyan, and we talked about some of the Philadelphia fighters years ago, sometimes when you lose, it actually makes you a better fighter because it improves you. But from a marketing point of view, the best thing you can have going for you is that O.
Yeah, it's unreal. It's mad because you look at some of these kids that get nominated for the Boxing Board of Control titles, like the English, the British and that. You know what I mean? You can have a kid who's like probably lost 3 or 4, but at a real hard, tough level. Then you got a kid that's probably 10-0 that's been boxed nobodies, and he'll get the nod over the kid that's, you know what I mean, boxed at an higher level and had a couple of defeats. It's crazy because of that. Oh, it means so much, which is wrong, really. But listen, you can either fight or you can't, Matt. You know that. You'll get found out sooner or later, no matter who you are. So that's the way the game is.
Do you see fighters sometimes? And I guess you must do, and you going well and everything's rolling along and they sell loads of tickets and maybe they've been signed by a major promoter, but you just kind of look at what they do in the ring and you just think to yourself, yeah, you're an accident waiting to happen. You're going to get put in deep and you won't be ready for it. And that'll probably be you done, because you do see it, don't you?
You know what? You've just hit the nail on the head. I see it all the time. And the trouble with some of these kids is they start thinking they're better than what they are. But because I've been there, done that, got the T-shirt, I know how the game is. I just know sometimes it's a matter of time that, you know, as soon as you step them up, they're going to get beat. You know what I mean? There's an old world of difference between fighting on a non-TV show, picking your opponents, making your kid look good, than going under them bright lights on a TV show. I know that myself as a fighter, mate. It's a world of difference, you know what I mean? And some kids can either do it and some kids can't. You know what I mean? It affects some kids more than others under them bright lights on a TV show. Some really adapt to it and some just can't do it. And obviously, when you step them up to TV level, you lose control of them as you know what I mean? Because you've got to give them, the big promoters, more of a shout on them. And obviously, they want them in more competitive fights. So it's a lot harder on TV shows for sure.
And just quickly before you have to nip off, Ryland Charlton, he's come to you, hasn't he? That must have been good.
Yeah.
You know, that again, you know, he signed with Matchroom. He took his opportunity during COVID, had a couple of good fights, a good win, and then the fight against Florian Marku, big ticket seller from what I hear. And that's a good kind of name fighter almost to come your way.
Yeah, you know what? The thing that amazed me with Ryland is when he come to me, and obviously I've got issue with his manager, Dan Naylor. He was one of my fighters that I managed. It was an away fighter. He trained with Frank Greaves up in London. But he went on the road. Talented Dan was a good amateur, but just couldn't sell tickets. So just went in the away corner. And he's a manager himself now. And he asked me if I'd be interested in training Ryland. I says, well, yeah, definitely. I said, could I bring him up for a trial? Brought him over. Got him on the scales at the end of the session, 10 stone 9, right? You got to bear in mind he's been fighting at welterweight, 10-7. This is a kid that had done 4 sessions, 4 runs in 6 weeks since the Florian Marco fight. I said, you should never, ever have been in that ring at welterweight. I said, I'm absolutely amazed. And what actually happened was, because he had that good win against Joe Laws at 10-4, it was sort of like forced into taking that Florian Marco fight, I think, to keep Matchroom sweet. And obviously, Dan's was a bit tired. So he's going to be boxing at lightweight, Andy. Honestly, he's going to be boxing at lightweight. If he's only a stone over now, I mean, he actually trained this morning, 10 stone 7. So he's coming down now. He's stepping up a bit. He's still just travelling from Norwich a couple of times a week, which is 3 hours to me. It's ridiculous. So when he gets a date, he'll be coming here to stay for 6 to 8 weeks, living in Newark, a bit like David does. But yeah, he's going to be minimum 140, but hopefully we can do 135. And what a force he'll be if he can keep his strength and power, because he can seriously punch that kid. You know what I mean? He needs a bit of work with him with a lot of things. He's not really been shown a lot in his career, but to get as far as he's got with just natural raw power, not really being shown a lot, then I've got high hopes for him.
Okay, great. Well, we'll let you go. You're due in the gym in 5 minutes. I don't know how close it is to your house, but I've probably made you late.
You're all right. You'll have to wait.
But great to chat. Great to finally do this. We'll do it again, definitely. And yeah, we'll see you. We'll see you in person, I hope, before too long, because they are relaxing things now. The PCR tests are going, I think, and it's moving to lateral flow. So that's a step in the right direction. Everybody listening, thanks once again for joining us. Like I say, if you can get onto iTunes and give us a rate and a review and all that kind of thing, that'd be great. And head over to the YouTube channel as well if you get the chance. We'll catch you again soon.